Over the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare many of the structural barriers to health, employment, and comfort that predominantly affect Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities in this country. These inequalities are staggering enough on their own, but combined with the deadly effects of COVID-19, an even worse pandemic begins to take shape.
You will see that African Americans have more hypertension, early onset, more premature hypertension, death from heart failure, premature myocardial infarction, and death from strokes. These are not driven as much by biology, but as by the fact that the social determinants of health, where people live, where they play, where they work, all affects these outcomes. As the health has improved, however, there's a real gap. And since the 1960s, there's a gap in mortality, whites versus blacks, driven mainly by cardiovascular disease. African Americans have more hypertension, diabetes, obesity, especially in black females, chronic kidney disease, end-stage renal disease, heart failure, premature heart attacks, and an increased death from strokes. These drive these disparities.
As a major factor because, we already know from history that black people have been used for guinea pigs, for a lot of things.
Called scientific racism, which at that time was simply science. And it posited that black people were very, very different from whites, medically and biologically. And this provided a rationale and underpinning not only for the institution of slavery. Slavery probably could not have persisted if there hadn't been this medical underpinning, but also for the use of blacks in research. For example, it said that blacks were less intelligent, subhuman, perhaps not even quite human, that they didn't experience pain, that they were immune to diseases like malaria and heat sickness that made it impossible for whites to work in the field, but made them perfect for labor in the field.
This dehumanization has thrived well into the 21st century, where we see the modern equivalents of this caste system being recreated by what we refer to today as mass incarceration. Mass incarceration is a system of laws and policing practices which began predominantly with the war on drugs and plays upon racist histories of crime and punishment to define who exactly in our society is deemed as worthy of recourse under the law.
While the US has less than 5% of the world's total population, it has almost 25% of the world's incarcerated population. The legal system targets Black and Latinx people with harsher prison sentences than white people arrested for similar offenses.
Law enforcement in the United States, thanks largely to the war on drugs, routinely targets people of color, often living in ghetto areas, for stops and searches, typically in a futile effort to find drugs.
Society. The second thing to say is that while there are people in certainly federal prisons and state penitentiaries who have been charged and tried and convicted of felonies, we also have an enormous number of people in jails and detention who are there for what are essentially administrative misdemeanors, things like unpaid fees, unpaid fines, failure to meet bail, in some cases failure to meet bail as low as $200. So these are people who are being exposed needlessly to the risks that we know about.
Anywhere from 25 to 60 plus beds in a wide open space, but they're typically a few feet apart. Most of the bathrooms, sinks, toilets, showers are all communal.
Was like, fuck it, try to keep the phone situation low key, but like this shit serious as fuck. Everybody in this bitch dying, and it's like, what the fuck y'all want me to do? Like, die in this bitch?
Candace, we cannot get away from each other. Look in the background. You see all of this? This is crazy. We just waiting to die in here. We just sitting ducks in here waiting to die. We cannot get away from each other at all.
Stay 6 feet, then they gave us these motherfucking masks and literally like said good luck. This ain't no joke. None of that shit. This is for real. They out here dying, bro. This is what they gave us. This little ass thing of soap to wash, to stay clean, like wash our hands and shit. And this for every 2 weeks.
They ain't sprayed down with no bleach. We had to go on a hunger strike, man, just to get these masks.
Guys up here scared to death, and then we watched the ambulance come back and forth, coming through the gates and rushing people up out of here. You know, and guys were just looking at each other. I mean, it was just like a dead silence in the room, and everybody was just like, oh my God, it's for real.
For the minority populations that are disproportionately filling up American prisons, the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic have been magnified tenfold. These prisoners have been forced into these conditions with little hope of escape. Despite community and legal pushback, actions to release prisoners have been mostly talk. We must do better. Their lives are on the line.